Today's daf on a special Motzaei Shabbat. We had to find a room down the hall to do it in. A special Motzaei Shabbat edition of Daf Yomi. Please let me know if I'm not loud enough or if it breaks up, but hopefully it's clear. Is Daf Chaf Gimel. So today is Chaf Gimel, and we are going to. I'll review quickly. We are actually on the top of Chaf Gimel on the second line on my Rava. But the really important introduction, and this is a very complicated daf, which usually means that there aren't so many words because Tosas takes over. But this is a really complicated discussion about, the Torah, as we talked about in our first Mishnah and have been discussing. There's 4 different kinds of nezek, right? At least that's one way to look at it. And we talked about shor, basically regel and shane and keren. We talked about a bar extensively. We're going to get more to it. And we talked about ish, a fire. And a fire is different. A fire has its own rules, right? A person lights a fire. The fire leaves their possession where they lit it, and it goes down the road, as fires do, and burns down someone's field. So the Torah says that if you light a fire and it goes out and it burns, you have to pay. And the question is, why? Right? Why are you responsible for that fire? What's the mechanism by which the Torah makes you have to pay? And so we had a machloket yesterday between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish. Rabbi Yochanan said that isho, you're chayav mishum chitzo, because it's like your arrow. It's as if you took your energy, the same way you would take it in an arrow. You gave the strength, you pulled back on the bow, the arrow went and flew somewhere. Wherever that arrow goes, it's as if you went. And so the same thing is true about your fire. Wherever your fire goes, it's as if you went. Reish Lakish didn't love that because obviously with the fire, there's other forces involved, unlike the arrow. But nonetheless, that was what Rabbi Yochanan said. The second explanation, Reish Lakish's explanation, was that you're chayav for isho mishum mimono, because it's your money, right? You built a fire, and so you own that fire. Whatever that fire does, it's as if your animal is doing it. So the same way you own a dog, you own a cat, you own a shar, is the case, and that shar does damage, you're chayav for that damage. The big implication, of course, the biggest one, was our Mishnah, because our Mishnah talks about a dog, that my dog, let's say, me, it goes to somebody else's fire and picks up a piece of bread on the fire and eats the bread. I have to pay for that eating. That's called shame. But if that fire then goes and burns something else down because the dog put it down on a haystack, then the Mishnah said you pay half damage. The question was, why would you pay half damage? If it's because it's in your possession, this is not your fire, right? According to Reish Lakish, why do you pay anything? It wasn't your fire. The owner of the fire shouldn't have to pay. The owner of the dog shouldn't have to pay because it wasn't his fire. So Reish Lakish had to explain that, in fact, you don't pay. That if you burn down this haystack, you don't have to pay. You only have to pay for the actual place where the dog actually put the coal down and singed that place, where you directly put it. But anywhere that wasn't directly touched by the fire, where the fire spread, you don't have to pay because it's not your fire. And Rabbi Yochanan said it's not the case, that in fact you do have to pay. And we talked about Srorod yesterday, it's a second level thing, etc. As the Gemara today in the top line, Amar Rava, second line, says Rava, Kashile le Abaya. Abaya was bothered by the following thing. Lemanda Amar Isho Mishum Chitzav. According to Rabbi Yochanan, that a fire is chayav because it's as if you put your energy into it and you sent off your arrows. Why don't we treat it like every other damage that a person causes, right? What about tamun? Why don't you? Tamun be'esh depater rachmana hechi mishkachadla. I don't understand why, right? A person, the Torah says that, remember we discussed this earlier, but we're going to come to it again more, that if you burn a fire and there's something hidden inside the haystack, remember there was a silver pot hidden inside the haystack, and he burnt everything down. He burnt down the haystack and the silver. Said the Gemara earlier, we'll say it again later, you're not chai for what's hidden inside that haystack. You're only chai for what's apparent, what you find. Says the Gemara, if according to Rabbi Yochanan, why would you be pater, right? If you view it as my energy, what I put into something, then the same way that if I hit someone, right, or did some damage to them directly, and it was hidden, I'd have to pay. There's no change. An Adam is only chayiv if they damage someone that they could see, but not someone they can't see. So why wouldn't you view a fire the same way? Why would you be pater for what's inside? Says the Gemara, and Rabbi Abaya answered the question. The case is where, let's say there's a haystack or a grain stack, we'll call it, in the yard of somebody else. I, the perpetrator, start a fire. My fire travels to his yard, right? And then, let me read it inside. But there's a fence, there's a wall, right? And the wall separates the fire from the grain. So my fire is where it shouldn't be, but it's not going to cause any damage. And then through no fault of mine, the wall falls down. And now my fire can go and burn the grain. So in that case, you really shouldn't be chayiv for fire, because if you had just sent your arrow, basically it would be as if I shot my arrow at a person, but there's a wall between me and the person, right? And in between the time the arrow left my hand and the time the arrow arrived, the wall fell down and the arrow went and killed the person, right? Or the animal. I wouldn't be chayiv then, because the time I shot it, I didn't have any expectation that wall would fall down, and so I'd be putter. So the same thing is true about your fire. We're talking about this weird case where there's basically a wall. When I started my fire, there was a wall to separate my fire. After the fire was moving, the wall fell down, and then it burnt the grain. And now I'm no longer chayiv mishum eish. I'm chayiv maybe because I damaged something, right? But I'm not chayiv mishum eish. Well, we'll ask that question in a second. So my, where am I? The fire went and it lit the grain stack on fire. The hizika, and it caused damage. B'chatzar acheret, in that other property, which now is exposed because the wall fell down. The hatam kalulei chitzav, because there my arrow is stopped, meaning the direct responsibility for my fire is stopped because there was a wall there. And so I can't be responsible for where my fire went beyond that wall. If the wall then fell down and the fire burnt it, I no longer should be responsible. Ask the Gemara if that's the case. Ihachi nami. Why are you chayav for anything? Right? Why would that be a case where you're putter for what's hidden inside the haystack? You should be putter for all the things the fire did. I sent out a fire. My fire basically stopped at the wall. The wall burnt down and then caused more damage. Why do I have to pay for anything? Ella, says the Gemara, and this is the girsa we have. So basically the question is according to Rabbi Yochanan. Rabbi Yochanan says you're chayav for a fire because it's your energy. But in a case where you lit a fire, but there was a wall, a firewall, we'll call it, right? Separating between your fire and the person's house. And that firewall then fell down for no fault of yours. You didn't knock it down. And then it burnt down his house. Says the Gemara, why would you be chayav according to Rabbi Yochanan? It's not your damage. Now, if you say you're chayav for eish mishum mamon, it's like my cow, right? I am responsible for whatever my cow does. I'm responsible for whatever my fire does. But if it's only my input into it, why would I be chayiv if my input could not have gotten there at the time I started the fire? Says the Gemara, well, the answer really is the man de itle mishum chitzav, itle nami mishum imono. In fact, Rabbi Yochanan agrees with Reish Lakish that not only are you chayiv for a fire because it's your arrows, you're also chayiv because it's your moment. So in a case where there was a wall and the wall fell down, so it's no longer considered to be your arrows, you're still chayav because it's your money, because the fire was your money. Says the Gemara, if that's the case, did I skip? Yeah. We're talking about a case where you should have known, you should have put up a fence there, meaning the fence had come down or something. You have a fire, you know that the fire can go and burn, so you should set up a new fence to protect the world against your fire, and you didn't. The hatam in that case, shorohu, it is equivalent to a case where you have a shor v'lo tafach ba'peh. You didn't lock it up properly, right? So you have a fire. It's like your animal. You didn't seal it properly, and so although when you started the fire, it couldn't have caused the damage. So as an arrow, you're not chayav. The fact is, it exists. You're the owner of it, and just like your animal, you have to pay. So basically, Rabbi Yochanan agrees with Reish Lakish about that reason exists, and he adds a second reason of being your arrows. Ask the Gemara, demand mishum chitzav, nami mishum emono. If he agrees, so my benayu. So what's the difference between them? Right? Now, Rashi points out there's a huge difference between them. The difference between them is the ratio, is everything we talked about yesterday, which is, let's say it's not the fire of the person who started the thing, right? With the dog, for example, or it's not in his property. So my animal takes someone else's fire. According to Reish Lakish, you're a potter because it's not your fire. According to Rabbi Yochanan, you're still chayiv because it's your arrow. So Rashi says, Tosfos here discusses this as well. Many Rishonim disagree with them, but Rashi says that we're trying to say, what about a case where it is your fire and it is your property? Where would there still be a difference between Rabbi Yochanan and Reish Lakish? And the answer of the Gemara is very, very interesting. Answers the Gemara, Ika beinayo l'chiyuva ba'arba dvarim. The difference is that are you chayav in arba dvarim? Remember that the arba dvarim sounds strange because usually we think of chamisha dvarim. So I'll explain that. But remember that unlike an animal that causes damage or a fire in general, well, let me take out a fire, or a bar, a human who causes damage has to pay not only one thing, but 5 things. It's things that are called nezek, tsar, shevet, ripoy, and boshet, right? If you damage another human, you have to pay damages, you have to pay their pain, you have to pay their doctor's bills, you have to pay the cost, the opportunity cost because they didn't work, and you have to pay the embarrassment, boshet. So says the Gemara, according to Rabbi Yochanan, that fire is your arrow. If my fire kills another person or damages burns another person's arm, Rashi says, it's like I personally hurt his arm. And I have to pay those damages. Now, the one you don't have to pay is boshet, because boshet, embarrassment, is an intentional thing. You have to intend to embarrass someone to be chayav for embarrassing them. If you don't intend to embarrass them, like you have a fire that clearly didn't intend to do it, you don't pay for boshet. So you have to pay only the other 4. But according to Rabbi Yochanan, if your fire burns another person, unlike an animal, where you just pay the damage, but if it's a person, you have to pay not just nezek, but also tsar, shevet, and ripoy in addition. Okay, not boshet. So that's the 2 dots. Okay, that's that discussion. I oversimplified, of course, greatly because this is Daf Yomi, but I welcome everyone to think about this some more. Continue the Mishnah, if you recall. We said that the dog went, my caliph went, it ate somebody else's donut. I'm going to call it charara a donut. And it took it along, because we're thinking about donuts, of course, right? It took it to, but it didn't eat it on the spot. It picked it up. It took it to a pile of grain. It's put it down there, but as it put it down there, it burnt the pile of grain. And so the Mishnah said for eating the donut, you have to pay full damage. That's called shame. For burning the grain, you pay half damage. And we discussed a lot why. Says the Gemara, one of the big questions is, where was the dog when it ate the donut? Okay, meaning we're assuming that it went from my house into somebody else's property to pick up their food, which must be someone else's chatzer, and then it took it somewhere else. Where did it take it to, right? So says the Gemara, well, first of all, let's read the Mishnah, right? Al charar mishalem, for the cake you eat, you pay full. For the gadish, you pay half. Says where man chayev, who has to pay? It's the bala gadish, bala kelev, sorry, the owner of the dog who caused the damage. Ask the Gemara, why don't you say that the person who made the fire is also chayev? The chayev nami bal gachelet, the one who started the fire, right? He or she started a fire, didn't protect it properly, so that a dog could come and pick up a coal and go walking with it. Why aren't they chayev at least partial damage, maybe, for that irresponsibility? Says the Gemara, well, it has to be a case where they did a good job protecting the fire. They set up a perimeter, a fence around the fire, right? So they did the right job. Says where if they watched it, then how'd the dog get there, right? How'd the dog get there if you put up a fence around your fire? The answer is b'shechatar. The answer is that the dog dug under the fence, right? The dog smelled this delicious donut on the other side of the fence, dug under the fence, picked it up, and although I can say I protected my fire, of course, dogs are normal, they dig. Amar of Mari Braid Rav Kahana, what you see from here, remember that shame, you're only chayiv if you do it a normal way, right? If an animal eats in an abnormal way, you're not chayiv full damage, at least for shame. So the fact that although there was a fence and the dog had to dig under the fence to get the food, you're still chayiv nezek shalem, means that it's normal for a dog to dig under a fence to get food, right? I guess so. I don't know that many dogs. But Amar of Mari Braid Rav Kahana, zotomeret stam delatot chaturot heinetzol kelev, that most doors are diggable for a dog, meaning you have to have an extra special door if you want to keep a dog out. But if you, I guess, to have a couple inches below the door in the ground, the dog's going to be able to dig under it and get there. And so you can assume that the dog will eat it. So it's normal for a dog to do it. but you can say I protected against my fire. Ask the Gemara now. The question I raised immediately before: where did the dog eat this charara, this cake, that then started a fire? Let's say it went out, I don't know, anywhere, meaning to the world, not in its own property, to gadish da'alma, and it ate it. Haba'inan ubiyar b'stei acher. Right? You need to have a case where your fire burnt it up in a different acher, meaning in a stay acher of somebody. It can't be in a public place. It can't be just stam out in area where anyone's allowed to be, right? Vileka, you don't have it. Says where you're right. Lo tzricha da'achla bigadish debal charara, that it stayed in the property of the person who owned the charara, and it burned. It picked up the cake with the coal on it. It put it down and burned in the possession of the one who was the Bal Charara in that same place, right? And so therefore, because of that, it's in Bistei Acher, it's in somebody else's property, and therefore you're chayiv. Now says the Gemara something really, really, really interesting, okay? And Tosfos says that this is a little bit, I wouldn't say facetious, but a little bit far-fetched. Let's leave it at that. But says the Gemara, if the requirement for shame, right, is that you go and your animal goes and it eats something in another field, right? That's the requirement for shame, right? What does somebody else's possession mean, right? So usually you would think it means it's standing in somebody else's possession. But ask the Gemara, this is an interesting question. Tifshot, you should be able to prove from here the pi para, at the mouth inside, turn the page to Chav Gimel Mebet, at the inside of the mouth of a cow is kechatzar hanizak dami, right? If I, the mazik, leave my cow and it walks into the field of the nizak and it eats an apple, its mouth, even though it's my cow, the mouth, because the animal's in the field of the nizak, is considered to be in the field of the nizak, right? Because if you thought that that's actually considered to be the mouth of the cow, since I own the cow, it's in my possession, right? Why can't the owner of the dog say to the owner of the cake, my ba'i riftach bepuma de kalbai? What was your cake doing in the mouth of my dog? My dog ate your cake, but if my dog's mouth is considered to be my property, then why is your cake in the mouth of my dog? Now, this seems bizarre, right? Because first of all, the Gemara's asking in a second, how could you ever be chayiv for shame? Every time an animal eats, it's in the property of the owner of the animal, right? But furthermore, we've had 100 cases where an animal goes and eats. Like, what are we talking about? So let's just read the Gemara till the end and suspend disbelief for a second, right? So because in fact, this is a question. We're at the third line of Chav Gimel Amud Bet. This was a well-known question, quote now, Pi para, the mouth, the inside of the mouth of a cow, is that kichatzar nizak dami? Is it like the reshut of the person in which the cow is standing, which is the person being damaged? Oh, kichatzar hamazik dami. Or is it in the chatzar of the person causing damage? Now, Amr, you're going to ask what Miriam was about to ask, I think. If it's kichatzera mazik dami, that the cow's mouth is the possession of the owner of the cow, so shein the chayav rachmana hechim mishkachatla. How could you ever be chayav for eating, right? Every single time an animal eats, it's eating it's in its own reshut, because by definition the animal's owned by its owner, right? Says the Gemara, Amar of Mari Breder of Kahana. There's another way to do shame besides eating. Remember we talked earlier that shein is the description of an animal doing something that's normal for an animal to do that gives the animal pleasure, right? Unlike regel or keren, which cause damage or normal walking, shein is getting pleasure. And what's one of the toldot of shein, we talked about this earlier, is rubbing its back against a wall, right? So let an animal rub its back against the wall. Nothing about the wall is inside the animal. So it's in the chatzar nizak, but maybe every single case of eating is not considered to be chatzar nizak. Again, it sounds very far-fetched. Tosfos agrees, but let's keep going with it. So what's the case? Amar of Mari Breder of Kahana, Yigon nitchakika b'kota lahanata. It scratched itself against the wall for its own benefit and broke the wall. right? So that's a told of shame, because even though it's not eating anything, it's getting enjoyment from causing destruction, right? It's not doesn't enjoy the destruction, but it enjoys itself while it causes destruction, right? Or tinfa perot lahanata, or the animal wanted to sit down, right, and it wants to roll around in the fruit, like animals sometimes will do, and it therefore caused damage to the fruit, even though it didn't eat it and didn't put it into its mouth. Matkif Zutra, well, that doesn't fulfill the criteria we talked about earlier. Haba'ina, remember we quoted this pasuk from Yeshayahu, now it's a quote, Ka'asher yiva'er hagalal ad tumo, as it uses up the thing until it's finished, right? Remember we said that you have to actually destroy something to be chayiv for shame. If you just lick it, you're not chayiv for shame, right? Veleka. Ravina says, well, no, you can destroy things by rubbing against them. Deshaf tzalmi. Let's say there's a beautiful painting. The cow walks into the Met, and it rubs itself up against the wall, which causes a lot of damage, and that's considered shame, right? And you totally destroy the tzelem. Or Ravashi says the pasi pasui, or it crushes it by stepping on it. And the animal can step on something, you sit down on it, totally obliterate the watermelon, right? And there's no watermelon left, but that would be considered shame. So you can't really prove it from there. Okay,
Cats are notorious for destroying things for their own pleasure without getting any obvious benefit from them.
What animal?
Cats.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Scratching up furniture, knocking things off of tables.
Well, so I guess the real question is that regel or shame, right? If it's walking along and knocks it off, I don't know.
Right. Good question.
Okay, continues the Gemara now we're not at two dots, but it's a tashmat. So I'm 10 lines down from the top. Very interesting and very, again, these are pretty far-fetched cases, but we are bringing them to learn more about the principles. So it says the Gemara, Tashma, come and learn the following bright. Shisa boeta kelef, right? The Torah, it's the Braita. A person sicks their dog on another person, right? Or shisabo et anachash, or a person causes their snake, right, to go and attack another person. Well, it's not. So let me rephrase that. It's not the same person, right? Meaning one person goes over to a dog that's owned by a different person, the balakelev, and encourages it to go attack somebody else, or the same thing by a snake. So the Braita says that you're patur. In that case, you are patur from the action, from chai of any damage that it causes. Ask the Gemara now. Man patur. This is the Braita actually. Who is patur? Mishaseya patur. The one who caused it to do damage is patur. Rashi points out because that's called a grama, right? I didn't directly. It's not my snake. I sort of told the snake go that way, or I pointed the snake that way, but I didn't directly pick up the snake and put it down on someone else, which we're going to discuss in a second. And so I only indirectly caused the snake to cause damage, and therefore I am patur for the damage of that snake.
No. But what about domesticated animals? Because a snake isn't domesticated.
The dog isn't either in that case. So the other animals wouldn't generally attack, right? But so we're just specifically talking about wild animals, I would say. So you take or animals that will attack, I should
because
say.
If your dog is trained to attack someone, when you say attack them, is that different?
It probably is not different. But let's keep reading. Mishasea patur, but says the Braita, the chayav bal hakelev. But the owner of the dog is chayav, right? Because since they didn't watch their dog, and they allowed somebody else to get close to their dog to tell to attack somebody else, the one who did the action and riled up the dog is patur, because they only did a grama. But the owner of the dog is chayav because they caused damage, say by biting or by eating something, right? Now says Gemara, if every time a dog opens their mouth and bites something, it's considered to be the reshut of the owner of the dog, right? Let's read inside. If the inside of the dog's mouth is like the ownership, the chatzar of the guy who owns the dog, why can't he say to the other person, who told you to put your hand in my dog's mouth, right? Says Gemara, well, that's a little bit, again, it's a really, really hard svara to think, but Ema, what you would have to say according to that svara is patur af mishaseh. Now, when we said patur, it's not just the one who owns the dog is for sure patur, but also the one who sicked the dog is patur because what they did was a grama and the grama is chayiv. Okay. Again, these are all, as Tosas points out, very, very, very far-fetched cases. Okay. I'll leave there. So continues the Gemara. Ibaitem, or some people would say that a dog can cause damage without something going in its mouth, right? Because a dog can stick out its teeth, maybe its canines, and bite you even without putting it inside its mouth. So it could be it's talking about a case, the afke lenive visarte. It stuck out its nive, which usually nive means teeth, maybe specifically here, pointed teeth, and it scratched you or bit you without putting it inside its mouth. So a dog can cause damage without putting it inside its mouth, and then, of course, it's not in the chutzner of the mazik. Tashma. What about the next case? Hishichbo at a nachash. So this is a Gemara in Sanhedrin, where a person takes their nachash, and you go to the zoo, you pick up the boa constrictor, you go to your former friend or someone you don't like, and you put it down on the person's skin. So are you chayav for that or not chayav for that? So says the Gemara in Sanhedrin, Rabbi Yehuda is mechayev. Yehuda says if that person gets bit by the snake and dies, you're chayav for killing that person. The Chachamim say you're potter. You take boa constrictors are venomous, right? No, take a viper, let's say, right? That's venomous, and you put on someone. Say the Chachamim you're potter. Why are you potter? Says the Gemara, Amar Vacha Bar Yaakov, Kishatim Salomar. What you have to understand is the divrei Rabbi Yehuda. According to Rabbi Yehuda, the words of Rabbi Yehuda. Ares nachash ben shinavu ome. The poison of a snake is present in its mouth. And so basically, when I take a snake and put it on your skin, it's like taking a needle and injecting poison into you. And so I directly killed you, right? And the fikach, and therefore, the fikach makish b'sayv. Therefore, the person who put the snake on his friend gets killed because he killed another person. Now, interestingly, the snake is patur, nachash patur, because the snake didn't do anything wrong. It was just the needle, right? So you would take the snake back to the zoo and say, sorry. But the divrei chachamim, ares nachash me'atzmo meki. And in fact, the snake does not have any venom. After you take the snake in its mouth at the time that you started the action, once you put the snake down and it bit the person, then it produces its own venom from maybe inside its body somewhere, and it injects it into the person. And therefore, although the person who attached the snake to someone else is a very bad person, and we don't look kindly on them, they didn't kill the person. They just started the action that ultimately killed the person, but the snake is responsible for that death. And therefore, it's a grama. The fikach, nachash b'skila, you kill the snake, like any animal that kills someone. Umakish patur, but the person who actually put the snake on the person is patur. Now that's a Gemara in Sanhedrin. Okay, again, very strange Gemara, but a Gemara in Sanhedrin. We'll get to Sanhedrin in a couple of years, right? Now, as the Gemara, the Amr, but if your opinion is that pi para kichatzer mazik dami, that the inside of the mouth of a cow is like the inside of the chutzner of the owner of the cow, Malay, why can't the person say, according to even the Tanakama, my ba yad right? What do you mean I'm higher for the snake? What's your arm doing inside the mouth of my snake? It's not my fault that you're there. So take it that far. Says, well, although this is really far-fetched, we're not going to go that far. We might go really far and say that the inside of an animal's mouth is not considered to be a different property. But for murder, we don't say that. If you take an animal and you kill somebody, doesn't matter who owns the animal, basically you're using the animal as an agent of death, it's a different rule. It says, how do you know that? Minat Temra. How do you know that murder is different? The Tanya, in fact, we have a brayta that says it very clearly. There's the following brayta. Of course we do. Anichnas lechatzer balabayit shelo b'reshut. Let's say a person trespasses in somebody else's yard, right? This happens all the time. Two little teenagers jump into somebody else's yard, and the dog in that yard, the shar in that yard, attacks them and kills them, let's say, okay? Or damages them. Says the Brayta. Now remember, generally for your animal causing damage, you're only chayiv if it's outside of your property. Because if another animal walked into my property, it's not my fault that it caused damage. What's it doing there? So let's say, says the Brayta, Hanichnas lechatzer balabayit shelo b'reshut, right? A person goes into the chatzer of somebody else without permission, v'nakcho sharo shel ba'al bayit umet. The shor attacks that person and that person dies. Okay? Says the Braita, hashar b'skila. You have to kill the shar. Because any shar that kills a person has to be killed. It's called a shar, well, it's not called shar skull, but it's a shar that's killed. It is
I have a question.
uba'alim peturim min hakofer, right? The owners don't have to pay the payment that you usually pay. Remember, the Torah says that if a person's shar kills a person, the shar yisakel, the pasuk says, ubal shar has to pay is what we gam ba'alav yumat is what the pasuk says, but we understand that to mean that instead of dying, they pay a kofar. They pay I don't know how you translate kofar, but like a redemption almost for them not dying. So in this case, you kill the shar, but you don't have to pay the kofar. Says the Gemara, why is that? Ba'alim piturim min kofar my taima damar le, because they could say reshute my bite. What are you doing in my reshut? Why? I mean, they can't say to the person who's dead. They can say to the family of the dead person, why did he come into our house? We didn't want him here. Wasn't not welcome here. It's not a safe place. Why? I'm not responsible for paying because he shouldn't have come in. Says Gemara, well, by the same svara, why does the shar have to be killed? The shar killed the man, but the man should have never been in the shar's household, right? The shar is happily eating grass, and this person came in and trespassed. So it says, why don't you see the same thing about the shar? Clearly, there's different rules for the one that kills somebody and the one who owns the thing that kills somebody. So death and money clearly are different. And that's the proof we're bringing from here. So let's read that inside. Ba'alim peturim min hakofer my taima damalek, because they can say b'reshuti my bud shara, right? But my bite, sorry. What are you doing in my property? So it says shara nami. Why can't the shara also go to court, right, and say, why are you killing me? Lehimalei. My ba'it b'reshuti. Why'd you come into my pen? Ella, clearly, le'in kitala lo amrinan. Clearly, that when you start talking about things killing other things, you don't say that same svara that it's your fault for being in the mouth of my animal. You have questions?
Yeah, does it matter if you invite someone into your property?
Yes, that's what shelo b'reshuti means. Right? It means without permission. If you give the person permission, then all of a sudden, then you're responsible for anything that happens in your property. Correct. Continues the Gemara. We are, I don't know, first word on the line, around 10 lines above the Mishnah. Hanu easy debate tarbu. There was a very unfortunate incident where there were goats that were owned by the Bnei Tarbu. And these were very poorly behaved goats. Davi mafsidi le the Rav Yosef. They used to go into Rav Yosef's yard and they would eat what did Rav Yosef grow? They would eat all his turnips, okay? And he was very upset about this. So Amar Leila Abaya, so one day Rav Yosef said to his friend Abaya, can you do me a favor? And Zil Ema Luhula Marayo, can you go tell their owners, the Litzna Indu, that they should guard them, they should put them aside so that they don't stop eating my turnips. Seems fair. Amar Le, so Abaya said to Rav Yosef, Amai, Eza, right? Why should I go? Meaning, what's the point of going? Dia Zilna, because if I go to them and say, Rav Yosef sent me, he's very upset that your goats are eating all his turnips. Can you please lock him up? What would they say to me? It's not our problem, but Rav Yosef put up a fence, right? He should have a fence around his turnips. Why don't they say to me, Dia Zilna, Amrili, they'll just say to me, Ligdor Mar Gadiri Bari. They would say to me, put up a fence around your land, right? So now, problem with this now is that this implies, as Gemara is going to continue, that everyone who's got a field has to put a fence around their field. Because otherwise, if an animal comes and eats in my field, I can just say, well, it's not my fault that my animal ate in your field. You should have put up a fence, even though it's clearly not my field, right? So the only time now that you might be chayav is when you put up a fence. The problem is that if you put up a fence, how'd the animal get in there, right? The animal broke the fence down. So if the animal broke the fence down, remember, shame, you're only chayav if it's normal behavior. It's not normal for an animal to break down a fence. So if you're expected to put up a fence, and the only time you're chayav is if the fence is broken down, then ask the Gemara, Gedar, if you have to put up a fence, Shem Chayav Rachman. So when the Torah says that an animal that eats in somebody else's field, you're chayav, when are you chayav? If there's no fence, you're telling me you're not chayav. There is a fence, and the animal knocks down the fence, that's not normal eating. So when do you ever have shame? Right? Says Gemara, well, no. It's talking about a case, Kisha Chatra. where the animal dug under the fence. We've already seen the animals are very good at that. So I put up a fence, but the animal dug under my fence. Then I could have a claim against the person and say, look, your animal went around my fence and now you have to pay. Inami, or possibly to nafal guda b'layla, or maybe if the fence falls down, right, in the middle of the night. So there was a huge hurricane, all the fences fell down, and now everyone should know, watch your animals because the world is not protected. And if you didn't watch your animal, that's where you'd be chayiv for shame. Now, Machriz Rav Yosef. Rav Yosef announced, he called out, V'itema Rabba, the Salikin Ilan, right? Those who go up to Eretz Yisrael, right? Those who travel, and Dinacht in the Tachta, and those who come down to the depths, which is the way they would talk about coming from Eretz Yisrael to Bavel, they should all know the following. Hani Izi Deshuka. If you have goats, Izim are goats, right? I think they're goats, that are in the shuk, right? That meaning they're Izim that are out and are essentially in the public, I would say. But Rashi explains that what they would do is that they were for slaughter, right? So they would, I guess they had one day where you slaughtered, people bought them. People would bring their goats, they would stay together in one area, and then one day, I guess someone would come with a big knife or a big setup, and they would slaughter all these animals. They were waiting for the day of Shechita, right? So those are called Iza Deshuka, I guess Izim that you're preparing for the marketplace. If these Izim, the mafsidi, right, if they cause damage, then matrinan b'marayo, we warn, we give hatra'ah to their owners, trey v'tlata zimni, 2 or 3 times, which is a lead up to our next Mishnah. We're going to talk about a muad. Eat tzayit. If they listen, good, then their animals are saved. V'ilo, if they don't listen, Amrla, you know what we say to them? Tiv amichsana v'kabel zuzach. Stand by the slaughterhouse and get your money. Meaning, we're going to kill your animals because it's not safe. Your animals are standing here. They're waiting for next Monday because next Monday you're going to get a better deal on your animals because everyone's going to come to the shuk. But they're causing public nuisance. So if you don't take care of your animals, we're going to kill your animals for you. And we'll give you the money whatever money you get to have from now, even if it's less money than what you would have expected. And so basically, Rabbi Yochanan, was this Rabbi Yochanan? Yeah, Rav Yosef, sorry. Rav Yosef was announcing that if you don't protect your animals, we are going to kill them for you. Now, of course, this is not that we can kill anybody's animal. The point here, as Tosfos points out, is that you were planning on killing these animals anyways. It's just that we are doing it earlier for you because they are not protecting, you're not watching them during that time. So we can kill them for you earlier, even though you're going to lose money in the proposition. Let's read the Mishnah and then we'll stop and we'll do it again tomorrow. But quickly, our Mishnah says, our next Mishnah, which we will pick up tomorrow morning, gets to the next question, which is that one of the cases we said before was a shar hamuad, right? A shar that is, we translate muad as does it frequently. Ask the Mishnah, Ezahu tam v'ezahu muad. What is an animal that's a tam, and what's an animal that's a muad? Remember that for regel, an animal walking, for shein, for an animal eating normal foods, there's no such thing as tam and muad, right? Maybe tzorot, but no big thing of tam and muad. You pay nezek shalem if it's normal, right? But for damaging, which could be many different things, including goring, but also, kicking if it's angry, or biting, or rubbing yourself against things if it's in anger, all of those things. If it's a tam, you pay chatzi nezek. If it's a mu'ad, you pay nezek shalem. Ask the Mishnah, what's a tam and what's a mu'ad? Mu'ad, tam is just a regular animal. A mu'ad is kol shehi'ida bo shlosha yamim, anything that they say 3 days, shlosha yamim, that this animal has done this, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, this animal gored another animal, then it becomes a mu'ad, and if it does it again on Thursday, you have to pay nezek shalem. Okay? That's a mu'ad. Now, how do you become a tam again? We're assuming this, right? You start off a tam, you become a muad. How can you become a tam again? Meaning you don't stay muad for the rest of your life. So tam, you become an animal becomes a tam again. If 3 days pass and it doesn't do any damage. Divrei Rebbe Yehuda. So most animals, every animal is born pure, right? That's how they would say it. Animals a tam. If it does the same thing 3 days in a row, it becomes a muad. But if it refrains from doing it for 3 days, it goes back to its status of tam, right? Now, of course, remember, you're supposed to kill the animal if it does it for 3 days in a row, right? So why is the animal still there? But let's just say you haven't yet killed it, right? You can still cause damage. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. That's the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Meir says, no, it's not 3 days. It's 3 times. We'll see this in the Gemara, but presumably, even if it's not 3 days, if the animal gores 3 other animals even in 1 day, it becomes a muad. And a tam, how do you then become a tam, right? How can you not do it 3 times, right? Because it's not based on days. Says Rabbi Yehuda, Rabbi Meir, it's based on kids, right? If the little children come and they start pulling the tail of the shar and it doesn't attack them, then it gets 1 good point. And if they do that 3 times, it becomes a tam, right? So tam kol shahayut yut tinokot mashmishim bo ve'eno nogeach. You annoy the animal and it has self-control. So the animal has demonstrated self-control 3 times, then it becomes a tam. Of course, it might cause damage along the way, so I would not encourage your children to go out and do this. And
I grew up around dairy farms, and I was terrified of the cows. They're huge.
They are very big. That is for sure the case.
They're really big, and they have a nasty kick, I understand.
So we will stop here. We will pick this up tomorrow morning at 7:45, almost 12 hours from now on Zoom. I hope to see everyone tomorrow morning. I'll read the Mishnah again quickly, and we'll go from there. Shavua Tov, everyone.
Shavua Tov, Yasher Koach.
Thank you.
Shavua Tov.
Shavua Tov.
Good night.
Thank you, Eli.
Thank you.